I walked 10 men into St. Francis Xavier Church in Dhaka, Bangladesh, during Sunday communion with a hammer in my jacket and a plan to smash the Eucharist on the altar steps in front of the entire congregation, to shatter the bread they called God, and show everyone in that building that nothing would happen, that no power would respond, that the Jesus they worshipped was silence and nothing more. But the moment I raised that hammer at the altar, something happened that not one person in that church, not the priest, not the congregation, not a single one of my 10 men, has ever been able to explain. Have you ever been so certain that God was on your side, that the idea of him being on the other side of the room never entered your mind? My name is Rafiq Anwar Al-Hussein. I am 29 years old, and on the morning of January 20th, 2019, I led 10 men into St. Francis Xavier Church on Johnson Road in Dhaka, Bangladesh, during the distribution of Holy Communion, with one intention: to take the consecrated host and destroy it publicly, in front of every witness I could gather, and prove once and for all that the Jesus Catholics claimed lived inside that bread was a story and nothing more. I had no idea that the Jesus I planned to smash was already waiting at that altar, and that everything I had built my identity on was about to be broken far more completely than any bread could ever be. I grew up in the Mirpur district of Dhaka, in a neighborhood where the mosque was the center of gravity, and the rhythm of the 5 prayers organized the day the way sunrise and sunset organize light. My father, Ustaz Anwar Karim Al-Hussein, taught Arabic and Islamic studies at a local madrasa, and was known across our area as a man whose piety was not performed for anyone's benefit. It was simply what he was made of. He prayed with the focus of a man who believed completely that someone was listening, and that belief passed into our household the way temperature passes through walls. My mother Rashida ran a Quran memorization group for the girls of our neighborhood every afternoon after Asr, and the sound of children's voices reciting in our front room was the sound of my childhood in a way I did not appreciate until it was gone. Faith was not a subject in our home. It was the home. I completed my Quran memorization at 14. The afternoon my father heard my final recitation, he sat quietly before he spoke, and what he said was not praise but something heavier, that Allah had placed in me something I was responsible to carry well. I believed him. While other boys spent free hours at cricket grounds or the tea stalls, I was in the madrasa with the older students, working through tafsir and arguing fiqh with an intensity teachers either admired or found exhausting. I fasted Ramadan from age 8, added voluntary fasts by 13, and treated every prayer as a meeting I could not be late to. I loved what I believed the way you love the thing that makes you feel most fully yourself. My father taught me about Christianity with the careful precision he brought to everything, patient, exact, without anger because he found argument more effective. The original message given to the Prophet Isa had been altered beyond recognition by men with institutional interests. The Trinity was the most visible result of that process, and the Eucharist, bread declared to be the living body of a man dead 2,000 years, was shirk made into liturgy, idolatry given robes and a schedule and incense. By 20, I had joined a religious student organization whose real energy was directed toward countering Christian missions in Dhaka. We leafleted outside churches, organized resistance to church building permits, and challenged Christian speakers at interfaith forums. I was good at it and believed every minute of it was what I had been made to do. By 28, I had graduated with a degree in civil engineering from Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology and was working for a construction consultancy in Motijil. I was engaged to a woman named Sumaya, the daughter of a senior lecturer at the Islamic University of Technology, a woman who combined genuine religious knowledge with a warmth that made people trust her on first meeting. We were to be married in the coming autumn. I had work, direction, a family that was proud of me, a community that respected me, and a faith that had never been seriously shaken at its roots. I had everything I had been taught to want, and I had not yet found a reason to want anything different. Ask yourself this question: have you ever been so fully inside the life you were given that the idea of a different and truer life never produced even a flicker of curiosity in you? The trigger came in December of 2018. A senior figure in our network, Brother Kamal, brought a recording to one of our meetings. A priest at St. Francis Xavier Church had been circulating talks on social media describing the Eucharist as not a symbol, but a living encounter with the risen Jesus Christ, available to any person with an open heart, including Muslims seeking the true God. Brother Kamal stopped the recording and said a priest in Dhaka was inviting Muslims to come and worship bread, and that silence from our side was indistinguishable from agreement. The plan formed over 2 meetings. I would go to the altar at communion, take the bread, and smash it in front of the congregation. Show them. Let every person watch the thing they called God fail to defend itself. I had no idea that the morning I designed to end the conversation was the morning the conversation was actually going to begin. I selected 9 men over 2 weeks. Prevails, a graduate student in Islamic jurisprudence, whose ability to articulate a theological argument was better than anyone I had worked with. Iqbal, who had grown up where a church and mosque shared a wall for 30 years and had strong feelings about every aspect of that arrangement. Tariq, my closest friend since our first year at university, who had been beside me in every significant thing I had done as an adult. We made 2 visits to St. Francis Xavier as ordinary visitors, mapping the interior, the altar position, the ushers' locations. During communion, the priest stood at the foot of the altar steps distributing the host to a line. We would enter during distribution, move to the front, and I would act before the ushers could reach me. The plan was clean, and my confidence in it was complete. Have you ever been so certain a plan was righteous that you never once held it up to the light and looked at it honestly? The night before, I made the tahajjud prayer alone in my flat at 2 in the morning, kneeling in the dark and asking Allah for courage and a steady hand. When I sat back, something arrived in the room that I filed and did not examine. A heaviness in the air that was not the ordinary heaviness of a closed room at night, a pressure in my chest that felt less like a feeling and more like a message I had already decided not to read. I told myself it was spiritual resistance, the natural weight of an important task, and went back to the mat. I barely slept. We arrived at 9:45 on a Sunday morning in January, the sky over Dhaka pale and overcast. St. Francis Xavier was a modest building on Johnson Road, white walls, a wooden cross above the entrance, a small garden where a few people stood talking before the service. We entered in pairs, took seats near the front, and waited. The interior was quieter than I expected, a cool, contained quiet that belonged to the space itself rather than merely the absence of noise. Incense and old wood mixed in the air. Candles burned at the altar and along the walls. The pews were almost full. Families, elderly men and women, a young couple sharing a hymn book, a woman near the front with her eyes already closed and hands folded in a posture that suggested she had been praying long before she arrived. The priest was an older man, slight and calm, who moved through the opening of the Mass with the precision of someone for whom this was not performance, but conversation. I kept my hand in my jacket pocket and my eyes on the altar. The priest came to the steps with the host at 10:15. That was the moment. I stood. My men stood. 10 of us moving from the pews into the center aisle, walking fast toward the front of the church. The congregation understood immediately that something was wrong. A sound moved through the pews, low and sudden, the sound of a room changing its understanding of what it is. A woman pulled her child against her. A man near the aisle stood and then, visibly, chose not to move, and instead bowed his head and began to pray aloud in a low voice. The ushers on the sides of the nave looked at each other and then looked at the priest. The priest watched us coming and did not move and did not speak, and his face held an expression that stopped something briefly in my chest. Not fear, not defiance, but a patience so complete it was almost impossible to look at directly. An old woman in the very front pew turned around in her seat to face me as I came level with her, and said in Bengali, clearly and without urgency, "Jesus loves you. He already knows why you came today." I was past her before she finished. I reached the altar step. I pulled the hammer from my jacket. I raised my arm. That is when it happened, the moment that changed everything I believed about God. My arm stopped at the top of its arc and did not come down, not slowed, not hesitated. Stopped, completely, in the way a machine stops when the power leaves it, suddenly and without negotiation. My arm was above my head with the hammer in my hand, and it would not descend, and it would not lower, and no instruction I sent it produced any result at all. I stood at the altar of St. Francis Xavier Church in Dhaka, with a hammer raised above my head, and I could not move it in any direction. Then the heat arrived, from the host, moving outward from the altar toward me rather than away, entering my raised hand first, and traveling down through my arm and into my chest, settling there with the weight and the warmth of something that had no intention of being argued with. It was not painful. It was the most enormous thing I had ever been in the presence of, and I say that as a man who had stood in the presence of a great deal of certainty in his life. This was larger than certainty. This was the thing that certainty is a small imitation of. I looked at the host. The bread was glowing. I want to say this as plainly as I can because I have had years now to find a better word, and I have not found one. The host held a light at its center that was interior, white gold and steady, generating rather than reflecting, entirely distinct from the candles on either side of it and from the light coming through the high windows. It was not a trick of the eye. Prevails, standing directly behind me, later told me he had seen it before he went down. Iqbal described the same thing. Tariq said it was the last thing he saw clearly before his legs stopped working. One by one, my men went to the floor. I heard them behind me, the sound of knees on stone in sequence. 10 men going down while I was still standing with my arm locked above my head, and the heat moving through my chest like something being given room to breathe for the first time. And then the voice arrived. Not sound in the room, something interior and complete, arriving the way a truth arrives when you have been living alongside it for years without acknowledging it. Not argued, not assembled, simply suddenly undeniable. I know you, Rafiq. Every prayer, every fast, every morning you rose before light and knelt, and called it devotion without knowing whose name you were reaching toward. I know you, and I have always loved you, and you are standing in exactly the right place. My knees gave way. The hammer fell. I was on the stone floor of St. Francis Xavier Church, weeping in a way I have never wept before and have not wept since. Not quietly, not with any attempt at composure, the tears already on the stone before I understood what was producing them. It was not grief, and it was not fear. It was recognition. It was the feeling of finally arriving somewhere you did not know you had been traveling toward, and the relief of it was so enormous it came out of me as something that sounded like grief, because the body has no other channel large enough to carry it. Around me, all 10 of my men were on the floor, some weeping, some completely still, some with their faces pressed to the stone as though they were unable to lift them. The congregation was silent. Then one voice began to pray, and another joined it, and within a minute the whole church was praying together, continuous and low, without a single note of victory in it. Only the sound of people who have been asking for something for a long time and are watching it arrive. The priest came down from the altar. He knelt beside me on the floor and placed his hand on my shoulder and waited. When I could hear him, he said it quietly, for me. He loves you, son. He has been waiting for you. Ask yourself this question. How do you explain meeting the living God at the exact moment you came to prove he was not there? When I could stand, I asked the only question that made sense to ask. The priest helped me to my feet. Tariq was beside me. Pervez was beside me. 3 others of my men remained in the building, still present, still capable of deciding. The priest led us to the front of the nave, and he prayed with us. And in that prayer, I said the truest words I have ever said in any language. Jesus, I came here today to destroy you. I have been wrong about you my entire life, and I did not know it. But I know you now, and I know you were real before I arrived, and you will be real long after I leave. Forgive me. Take everything I thought I was. I surrender it all to you. 5 of my men gave their lives to Jesus Christ that morning on the floor of St. Francis Xavier Church in Dhaka. I was baptized 8 weeks later and given the name Peter, because the priest said Peter was a man of tremendous conviction who had to be broken before he became unbreakable. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever received something so real it required you to become a completely different person to hold it? I had no idea what that becoming was going to cost me. My father's voice, when it came, was even and final. You are no longer my son. You have brought a shame on this family that the name Al-Hussein cannot carry and remain what it is. Do not call again. My mother did not call. She sent my younger brother with a box of my belongings, and he handed it to me at the door, without entering and without speaking. Sumayya's father dissolved the engagement through an intermediary. Sumayya sent one message. I don't know who you are now. The organization I had served for 9 years declared me apostate. My position at the consultancy was ended within 2 months through the same community networks. I received enough threats to make staying in Dhaka unsafe and left the city 6 months after my baptism. My father, my mother, my fiancé, my organization, my career, my city, all of it surrendered inside 1 year. But I gained everything that truly matters. I gained Jesus Christ. forgiveness I had not earned, peace with no floor beneath it, and a love so consistent it had no framework in my previous experience. I gained a church family who loved me in the practical, daily ways that genuine love requires. I met a woman named Naomi, 18 months after my baptism, at a Baptist church in Chittagong, where I had resettled. She was a pastor's daughter who told me, when I shared my story, that she had been praying for a husband who understood what it cost to choose Jesus. She was quiet for a long time when I finished, and then said she believed she had been praying for me by description, without knowing my name. We were married at St. Francis Xavier Church in Dhaka. I returned for that specifically. The priest who had knelt beside me on the floor officiated. 4 of the men who had fallen at that altar with me stood as my groomsmen. Naomi and I have a daughter. The first words she heard in the world were not the Adhan. They were her mother, praying over her by name. I now work with a ministry carrying the testimony of Jesus to Muslim communities across Bangladesh and in diaspora communities in the United Kingdom. I had no idea, on the morning I walked into St. Francis Xavier with a hammer in my jacket, that over 65 Muslims would eventually come to faith in Christ through hearing what happened at that altar. I still write to my parents at Eid and at Christmas. I have received nothing back. I pray for them with the constancy they taught me. I had no idea, when I left Dhaka, how many doors were about to open. I returned to that altar once, standing in the exact place where the hammer had fallen and my knees had followed it. I placed my hand on the stone step and stayed a long time. The man who walked through those doors with a hammer and the complete certainty that nothing would answer him no longer exists. In his place stands a follower of Jesus Christ, who would lose every earthly thing again before he denied the name of the one who answered him anyway. If Jesus can love someone like me, a man who came to his altar to smash what he called holy, then there is no story you carry that places you outside his reach, no matter what you have done or where you come from. The same Jesus who locked my arm and broke me open on the floor of that church is present in this moment, in this testimony, reaching toward whatever in you has been most defended and most certain for the longest time. He is not asking you to arrive with your questions resolved. He is not waiting for a less complicated version of you to show up first. Look inside your own heart right now. Jesus is calling you right now, not when you have more answers, not when the moment is more convenient. Right now, in this breath, in this exact place you are sitting, will you stop fighting and discover what I found when I finally stopped?